Jesus Christ suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. What is the importance of the paschal mystery of Jesus?
The paschal mystery of Jesus, which comprises his passion, death, resurrection, and glorification, stands at the center of the Christian faith because God's saving plan was accomplished once for all by the redemptive death of his Son, Jesus Christ.
What does paschal mean? Just Easter?
Yeah, so, the Pasch, the Passover. So it's like, to wind back, we've done Christ and his life, and his earthly life, and now we're doing his death and resurrection. The first thing to say about that is, like, it's all one event, right? Like, the death, the crucifixion, the death, the resurrection, the glorification are a discrete event.
Hold on, sorry, I'd never thought about this before, but that Passover is all about God not killing your son, and then Easter's all about God killing his own son.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Mm-hmm. He's the paschal lamb and all that sort of stuff, right? Like
you had to kill the lamb and smother the blood across your door.
Yeah, otherwise your first son died.
Yeesh.
Yeah. So, but like in terms of the discrete event, so like at the Easter Mass, for example, so like starting on Holy Thursday, going to Good Friday, and then finishing on Easter Saturday.
Yeah.
There is no, like, at the end of Mass, there's no dismissal, right? So it's all one
No
liturgy.
one says go in peace.
No. There's not, like, it doesn't end.
You wander
right?
out.
It starts on Holy Thursday,
Yep.
and it finishes on Easter Saturday, because it's like one liturgy, which is the liturgy of his death.
So at
and
Easter
resurrection.
Saturday they do have... Well, Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
Easter Sunday you mean? Or
No, the Easter Saturday. That's the
right.
end of the Triduum, is what it's called.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Easter Sunday is this whole new exciting...
Well, it's a whole new day, because that's the day he's rose again on. Yeah. But
Yes.
he rises in the morning, which is why you do it at midnight.
Ah.
Yeah.
But there is an Easter Saturday liturgy before then.
No.
There's no Easter Saturday liturgy?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So that series of liturgies is one event. So we should think about it as like his crucifixion, death, resurrection, and glorification is one event.
Good Friday is the last mass you go to before the big one.
It's not even a mass; it's a liturgy.
Sorry. Well, actually, I got into a big stoush once. It's one of the only times. It's one of about 5 to 10 to 35 times that I've had a couple of drinks and gone on Twitter and popped off on somebody.
Yeah.
I think it was an Australian media commentator who was attacking Scott Morrison,
right?
Because he'd been at a Maronite church.
Yeah.
And she said, for Good Friday Mass.
Yeah.
And I popped off and said, there's no Good Friday Mass. And all these people like, you pedant dog. And then some people
Well, also,
like,
it's not
there
correct.
is.
It's also not correct to call an Eastern Rite liturgy a mass. Because
What?
Yeah, because it's a Western thing. They call it the divine liturgy. We call it the mass. It's like a Western term.
I don't know that.
And they will get, if you say to an Easter, like, I went to your mass, they'll be like, no, you didn't. You didn't go to our mass. We don't have mass.
They have what, just a liturgical...
No, they just call it the divine liturgy.
The divine liturgy.
Yeah.
But do they have non-divine liturgies?
Well, like, you have like...
What is... I mean, liturgical... I know that liturgical is relating to the rubrics of a mass.
Yeah.
But, like, what is liturgical...
So you would also have, like, for example, like
text?
Vespers or something,
Yep,
which
it's
is
a
a liturgy.
liturgy,
It's
yes.
the liturgy of the church, but it's not the divine liturgy,
okay.
right? It's not the liturgy of the Mass. It's not the liturgy of Christ being crucified.
And it's a mass.
They don't say Mass, no. It's a Western thing.
I didn't know that.
And they get very
But
touchy.
even the ones who have come back in with the...
Yeah, even the Eastern Rite Catholics, they're like, well, that's a Western thing. That's Mass, yeah.
But one might at least say that it's a non-divine liturgy on Good Friday? Or does the distinction disappear?
We would call in the West we call it the Mass of the Pre-Sanctified, right? Like, so, because there is no confection of the Eucharist at the Good Friday liturgy. It doesn't happen. The priest doesn't say, this is my body, this is my blood.
No, he just packs up.
Yeah.
And then they spin that thing that sounds like a duck. Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was just a little aside.
Okay.
So, but that's the Paschal mystery, is the crucifixion, the death, the resurrection, the glorification. It's all one event. Because he's redeeming by all of these things. This is what he's come for.
Passover.
Yeah.
Passover. So it's the act of being saved by that event.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, what were the accusations by which Jesus was condemned to death?
Some of the leaders of Israel accused Jesus of acting against the law, the temple in Jerusalem, and in particular against faith in the one God, because he proclaimed himself to be the Son of God. For this reason, they handed him over to Pilate so that he might condemn him to death. So again, that's the other thing. Is like, why is Christ ultimately killed? He's ultimately killed for proclaiming who he is, which is that he is God, right? Like, and so when people sort of go, oh, Jesus was crucified for like saying nice things. So no, very specifically, Jesus is crucified because he's claiming to be God, And that's why the Jews had to kill him, right? Because they're like, oh, he's breaking the law.
But do we say that in the current discourse that the Jews killed? I mean, they certainly initiated a process, but literally the Romans killed him.
We do get that in a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I mean,
but people get very particular about that at the moment.
I think I'm going to defer that conversation to
happy to do it. Can't wait till we get to discuss the role of the Jews in the death of the Messiah.
It's 3 questions away.
Really?
So, yeah, let's power on. Yeah.
Nothing controversial will happen, I'm sure.
Exactly.
How did Jesus conduct himself in regard to the law of Israel?
So this is related to the previous question because it's like, well, he was put to death for breaking the law of Israel.
Yeah.
Jesus did not abolish the law given by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, but he fulfilled it by giving it its definitive interpretation. He himself was the divine legislator who fully carried out this law. Furthermore, as the faithful servant, he offered by means of his expiatory death the only sacrifice capable of making atonement for all the transgressions committed by men under the first covenant.
So what does expiatory mean?
Like, he expiates, he releases the sin sort of thing,
right.
you know, yeah.
An expiation notice.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, this is an important thing because it's like, so the first question is like, well, why was he killed? He was killed for the perception that he was violating the law. What's the church's answer to this? He's not violating the law. As he says, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. He is the author of the law because he is God. And so he comes and gives us its true interpretation, which is why he says things like, you know, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And all that sort of stuff, right? Like he's got these like really pithy insights into how the law is being applied at the time because he knows what the law is for because he's the author of it. And then he says, well, like it's not that he comes to abolish the law; he's just come to give it its true interpretation, which is why you can sort of you can get rid of all the sort of like circumcision stuff and the don't eat shellfish stuff because that's not like the crucial stuff. The crucial stuff is living the commandments.
Well, we can see how. I mean, I think America's more... We don't have the same problems with interpreting laws that Americans have, because maybe it's easier to pass laws in this country. Yeah. Because you can just sort of do what you want. But it's like very clear how the law can remain the same and the interpretation and practice of that through different times can be bastardized, I'm happy to say.
Sure.
Seems insane. And I don't think I give anything away there. I mean, obviously, the fact that I'm on a conservative Catholic podcast would scream which way that I think that would go. But everybody thinks that what's happening with the law in America is wacky.
Everybody thinks it.
But it would be equivalent as if you could get the man who wrote that law to come down. If Benjamin Franklin could be there and go, hey, everybody. I don't know if Benjamin Franklin wrote the laws. I don't know enough about their thing. But I think that's a fair
John Hancock
point.
rocked up and he was like...
Did he write the laws? I just knew he signed his name.
He signed the Constitution. Yeah.
He's the first one, right?
I don't know if he was the first one. He just had the big signature.
Yeah.
It's like John Hancock.
And everyone had to be really small around it.
Yeah, it's great.
I started listening to the Federalist Papers on podcasts recently.
Told me. Yeah.
Some of them suck.
Yeah, they suck.
Like, it makes you think, everyone's like, the founding father, and you just listen to it, and the arguments are so not compelling.
Yeah.
But, maybe these people are right to bastardize this Constitution. What was the attitude of Jesus towards the temple in Jerusalem?
Jesus was accused of hostility to the temple. On the contrary, he venerated it as the house of his father, and it was there that he imparted an important part of his teaching. However, he also foretold its destruction in connection with his own death, and he presented himself as the definitive dwelling place of God among men. So the temple in the Old Covenant is the very dwelling place of God. It's where God exists on earth. So, I mean, that's particularly true in the first temple, but when that's destroyed and they rebuild the second temple, even though they don't have the covenant there anymore, they still have the Holy of Holies, and it's still believed to be where God dwells. So Christ then, like, as
but
a child...
They know there's nothing there at that point, because Pliny goes in there. Who does it?
Octavius.
No, hold on.
No, it was Octavian.
He might do something similar.
No, it's Pompey.
It was Pompey. Thank you. It was Pompey. Pompey goes in there and says, there's nothing here.
There's nothing here.
But they knew there was nothing there at that point. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but like that... It's
they
like,
still think he's...
But it's also like that, it's the place where the first temple was, which is where they left the covenant last. That's where they last saw it.
So wait, when did they lose it?
So the destruction of the first temple.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's taken by the Assyrians and then disappears into the sands of time, which is why you get like Indiana Jones and the temple.
Also, the Ethiopians insist that they have it.
Yeah, they could have it. Who knows?
Well, we can know. I've often thought that would be a cool...
Just open it up and see if the Nazis get melted.
How much security could they possibly have? Seriously.
But yeah, so Christ is still, he venerates the temple because he's, he goes there when he's a child. He's like, he is involved in the temple sacrifices and stuff.
Yeah.
He takes part in the temple ritual. But then he's sort of like saying, but like, I am the true temple. And to show that the temple will be torn down in 3 days and then raised back up. And they're like, oh, that's crazy. Like, you can't destroy the temple and raise it back up in 3 days. We know because we just rebuilt this thing and it took us years.
Yeah.
But he's obviously talking about his own body.
In hindsight, he's obviously talking about his body.
Yeah, exactly.
At the time, it
At
sounded
the time, it's obscure.
Yeah.
Because particularly because you don't believe what he's saying. But then, like, so the whole thing of like when he dies, the curtain in the temple is rent.
Top down, right?
Right, because it's like that's just exposing the Holy of Holies as empty, right? Like, no, God is not here anymore. Now the covenant has been fulfilled. He exists in Christ.
So someone had to put that back up in time for Pompey to get... No, Pompey was it before?
Pompey was before.
Pompey was before.
Yeah.
How much before? It's like
It's like a generation.
It's one generation.
Yeah.
So really, they've only been subjugated for... It always surprises me when I think
by the
about how
Romans,
little they've
yes.
been subjugated. They've been subjugated by other people for a long time.
Yeah, by the Romans, it's a very new,
Yeah.
like regime for them, basically.
What was the... Which is also weird because they'd gotten everything else by that point. The Romans had most of the Mediterranean for a long time.
Not that long. Like, certainly parts of it, but
When did they win the Punic War, Third Punic War?
Yeah, I mean, that was a little bit before, but they
Yeah.
they don't want to do the empire thing, right? Well, they say they don't. They just sort of like subjugate and have these like
Jack,
political
Rome
alliances.
fought exclusively wars of self-defense.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I really do believe that. What was the attitude?
No, we did that.
one.
Yeah.
Did Jesus contradict Israel's faith in the one God and Saviour?
Jesus never contradicted faith in the one God, not even when he performed the stupendous divine work, which fulfilled the messianic promises.
Language.
Yeah. Which fulfilled the messianic promises and revealed himself as equal to God, namely the pardoning of sins. However, the call of Jesus to believe in him and to be converted makes it possible to understand the tragic misunderstanding of the Sanhedrin, which judged Jesus to be worthy of death as a blasphemer.
Misunderstanding of the Sanhedrin?
They just misunderstood.
What is the misunderstanding of the Sanhedrin?
That's where they say, crucify him, crucify him.
Oh, that's the
Sanhedrin. Yeah.
The Sanhedrin is the saying crucify him.
So, the Sanhedrin is like the highest court in Judaism at this point.
Yeah.
So, and you read in the Gospels, like that he's taken to another court first, and then they're like, oh, we've got to take him to the Sanhedrin, because they're the ones, the elders of the Jewish community or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that make the call. And they're like, yeah, let's take him to Pilate, let's get rid of him. Next question.
Yes.
Jimmy's been looking forward to this.
Who is not looking forward to it, just approaching with some level of...
I think it's important to know that James loves Kanye West.
Love his music and some of the interviews. But if any part of this could get the podcast removed immediately, it's this bit. Who is responsible for the death of Jesus?
The passion and death of Jesus cannot be imputed indiscriminately either to all the Jews that were living at the time or to their descendants.
See, that's the first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Really does.
Let's finish it.
All right.
Every single sinner, that is every human being, which means you and me,
Yeah.
is really the cause and instrument of the sufferings of the Redeemer.
Nice.
The greater blame in this respect falls on those above all who are Christians and who the more often fall into sin or delight in their vices.
But you can see from the structure of the way they've put that together that the answer that people might have historically had or out in the community would be the Jews. Because it's very rare that you open, hey, who did that? Well, it wasn't the Jews. I mean, that shows that there's a discussion where people have said, it's the Jews. The Jews killed. And in the literalness of the story, it's the Jews bringing Christ.
And again, it's a matter of how you're speaking about things, because literally who did kill him, and it was obviously historically...
Romans.
Well, yeah, I mean, but the Jews offered him up to the Romans, and the Romans kill him.
If I bring flour to a baker, who's baking the bread?
The theological point that's being made, exactly, is like... who's responsible for the death of Christ, ultimately. And
he's here for our fallen nature. And
exactly. He's here for us sinners to restore us with Christ. And then it goes on to say, even though historically we can say, well, the Jews did it, which they did, on the theological level, who was the most responsible? And the answer is actually the baptized, right? Because like we have been given grace, we have been given the thing that God has promised to restore us to our truth and order and all that sort of stuff. So when we sin, like the corruption of the best is the worst, when we sin, it's actually worse than when non-believers sin or when Jews sin or whatever, because we're doing it knowing the truth. We're doing it with the fullness of the truth in our minds. And it's like, that's actually worse. And so in a lot of ways, we're more responsible.
Yeah, I mean, time is fixed and linear, though, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
So my concupiscence in the here and now
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change. I can't be such a good Christian and sin so little that the Bible disappears and that was never necessary.
Well, exactly, because we don't believe in Pelagianism, where you can earn your salvation by your own work.
Yes.
You have to do it with grace, and we only have the grace because of this event.
Yeah, I mean, but responsible there is the church has a long history of. I'd say Europe. Europe has a long history of blaming the Jews.
And I think that's a different point.
Yeah.
Which is that what has the church always said? Has the church always said the Jews did it? It's all the Jews' fault, and we're all good. Don't worry about it. No, and there may have been popular beliefs about that, culturally and all this sort of stuff. But the church has always maintained that responsibility lies on every human soul, right?
I mean, it also seems a slightly perverse thing to get carried away with. It's the Jews who did it. Mm-hmm. Because Christ is a Jew. People following Christ are Jews.
Yeah.
People who are the apostles are Jews.
Yep.
And, so who's spreading the message? It's the Jews.
Yeah. St. Paul was a Jew.
Well, yeah, even some of the Jews who are killing and persecuting are then, it's not like that's the dividing point where, that's the Jews we have today is the sort of the Wagner point where it's like the Jews of today are not the same as all the good Jews left and the bad Jews percolated in their own evil Jewishness. I mean, this is what people believe.
Yeah.
But it's
insane.
just demonstrably not true. The people who are doing that and calling for him to die or who are abandoning him are the same ones who come back to the church.
And I think anything that smells like that Wagnerian point is sort of maybe this will be cut because it's too racially sensitive. But this idea that the Jews now would somehow be completely corrupted is the least Christian thing you could possibly think. Because it's Gentile Jews, serve nor free, everyone is born in the image and likeness of God, and everybody has this grace available to them. And if you're going to have some sort of racial profiling thing going on where you think because of your genetics you're somehow more doomed to sin or something, it's that can be a belief, but it's not a Catholic belief and it's not a Christian belief.
Yeah. Which part of that did you think was going to get you cancelled?
Oh, well, I mean, any of this stuff is touchy, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think, when read honestly and fairly, it's a very... It's basically what liberalism is built on. Is this thought that everybody is responsible.
It's one of the things liberalism is built on. Yeah.
Well, Christianity is what liberalism is built on. You can't have
isolated parts of Christianity, I think, is what liberalism is built on. Yeah.
You've become as argumentative as
No, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I think Chesterton says this, and I've always quoted Chesterton because I love him.
Yeah.
He says this in Orthodoxy, where he says that the modern world is not some hedonism or heathenism. It's actually the virtues of Christianity released from the other virtues, right? It's the vices gone mad, where it's it's not just because freedom is a Christian virtue, but what we've done is release it from prudence and temperance and justice.
I'm not saying it is the natural evolution of Christianity.
Yeah, okay, good. No, okay, that's fair.
Teleological end. What I'm
it's a
saying
very
is
important
that
point.
liberalism does not grow out of the goods in a similar way of
Islam or something. Yeah, sure.
I mean, to some extent, I don't know what the secular Islamic state looks like, but it's going to look very different to the post-Protestant.
Yes.
In the same way that Protestantism can really only grow out of Catholicism. There is no the
and capitalism out of Protestantism.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to accept all of that. But if you look at what grows out of the Orthodox, what are the break-off movements from the Orthodox that they have to deal with?
Yeah.
It's old believers. It's people for whom doing a little hand gesture is very important in a certain way.
Right. And kneeling in the right way.
Yeah, people cutting off their dicks and stuff.
Yeah. Normal stuff. Yeah.
Well, we've managed to find our way there too. Now, 118, different reasons. 118, why was the death of Jesus...
Very, very nice, James.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how I could do it.
Yeah.
Part of God's plan.
Is that why you keep taking your hat off?
I keep thinking about the best way to do it, but I can't do it
really
with
funny.
the book and the thing.
Yeah. To reconcile to himself all who are destined to die because of sin, God took the loving initiative of sending his Son that he might give himself up for sinners. Proclaimed in the Old Testament, especially as the sacrifice of the suffering servant, the death of Jesus came about in accordance with the Scriptures.
So can we go back to the Jewish thing for a second?
I suspected we weren't done.
Yeah, no, it's just, well, there's one bit biblically, though, isn't there, where it's like the Jews cry out, let this be, hey, we'll take responsibility.
Yeah, let this
like,
be on.
I think it's specifically, this is maybe skimmed over so that we can get to the beautiful point, but it does deserve, I think if we don't talk about it, people mention it. Yeah. There is a bit in the Gospels, and maybe we want to get this
in the Gospel of John,
more close than me just riffing off the top of my head. But they're like, no, it's us, the Jews, and it's our children, and our children's children as well.
Yeah. Be it on our heads.
Hey, we'll cop this one. So we're saying here that it's not really, the Jews do not have the power. Like, such is the widespread nature of sin, that even if those Jews at the time were trying to take responsibility for killing Christ, this man who is blaspheming, in their opinion, presumably, you don't have the power to do that. You can't concentrate all of the world's sin on yourselves, even if you rhetorically say that that's what you want to do.
And Christ came Christ came to redeem all,
Yeah.
or we say for many, right, for those who choose it, which includes Jews and Gentiles. And clearly it includes Jews, because at the time, all of his mates were Jews, and the first, most of the first century, it's mostly a Jewish movement.
And Paul just goes on and on and on about how he wishes more Jews were converting.
Yeah. And he was one of them, right? Like, he's like the worst one, you know? I put it in quotation marks.
Yeah, one of the worst ones.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to. I just
It's
remembered that was in there. And look, some of this stuff is political, and there are definite. If you go to the big boy version of this, the one which is like 5 times as long.
Yeah,
they probably get into more detail about things like that.
Yes, and I'm sure if people ever actually end up watching this, there'll be lots of sort of anti-Semitic remarks that some edgy edgelord Tradcast will make. It's like, oh, well, what about this pope in the 12th century who said this? But also one of the defining marks of the popes throughout the centuries has been, the judgment on whether or not they're a good pope. Yeah, is how they treat the Jews, and it's basically it's very difficult to find one of the popes that's held up as a good pope that wasn't extremely concerned with the local Jewish community in Rome and protecting them from
but
insane
also
stuff.
The insanity of going Pope Francis is just saying whatever you like about all of his pronouncements, and then going but I found this other pope who agrees. The popes can say dumb stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And the modern example is Pope Pius XII, and he allegedly didn't do enough to prevent the Holocaust and all sort of stuff. But he
did some stuff, didn't he?
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I haven't read enough about it.
Yeah, he didn't want to get picked off by the Nazis, but he was also ready to get picked off by the Nazis.
Yeah, not a lot of people came out of... I think the Catholic Church probably comes out of the Nazi regime better than... Just having read the rest is... Not read. Look at that, already taking credit for something a little more intellectual than it was, but... in the Rest is History podcast on the rise of the Nazis, where they talk about the Concordat?
Yeah.
Is that the right phraseology?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. The Catholic Church, while cutting a deal with Hitler, does get to be the only institution that's not subject... to the Nazis in society.
Again, like you're saying, it's one of these things where it's legally that's the letter of the law, but in practice that also doesn't happen. And there was definitely collaboration between facets of the Catholic Church and the Nazi regime, including in Eastern Europe, and all this sort of stuff. And that is it's a shame on.
What are we doing in China now?
Right.
What are we doing in China now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same shit.
Now to return to. Why was the death of Jesus part of God's plan? Could we just go through that again? To reconcile himself to all who were destined to die because of sin, God took the loving initiative of sending his Son so that he might give himself up for sinners. Proclaimed in the Old Testament, especially as the sacrifice of the suffering servant, the death of Jesus came about in accordance with the Scriptures. Okay.
So I think there is one thing to say about the sacrifice element, which we will get to further on when we do the Mass.
Yeah.
But when we're referring earlier to how did Jesus treat the temple cult, and he's very on board the temple cult. He's happy to be in the temple. He goes
along with it. He wants we wouldn't say the sacrament of circumcision, or we would.
We would not say the sacrament of circumcision. Yeah. Thomas Aquinas talks about it as a sort of
I never thought about it.
Yeah,
Of course it would have been.
as a proto-sacrament sort of thing. Yeah.
So the proto-sacrament of circumcision
right.
he participates in
Yeah, exactly.
would have been weird if as a baby he was like,
Yeah.
no.
But the sacrifice of the temple can never do the thing that they're supposed to do, and the thing that they're supposed to do is reconcile the Jews with God.
Yeah.
But they keep having to do them, right? They keep having to do the sacrifice of atonement every year, all these sorts of things.
Blood flowing out onto the streets.
Because it's never enough, right?
Yes.
And it's never enough because, like, no thing that we do as humans will ever bridge the gap that we have formed through rejecting God in original sin. So what does God do? God doesn't sort of leave it up to us. He comes down as a man.
Yeah.
And then he offers himself as, like, the fullness of that sacrifice, right? So all these sacrifices of the temple are, like, made manifest in Christ and fulfilled in Christ. And now because of him, because he's made this one sacrifice for all time, we don't have to do these sacrifices anymore.
Now, but many Jews have gotten to that point themselves now. Just like theologically over the years, because they haven't had a temple in
because they don't have a temple.
time.
Yeah, they don't have a temple, so they can't do it.
So they can't do sacrifice. But they don't think that they're entirely alienated. Some do. There are some who are like, we've got to build this temple legally split and start killing some stuff.
Exactly. I mean, there is like a movement in like contemporary Zionism to like rebuild the temple. Yeah.
Does it have to be in the exact same spot?
Yeah.
Here's a thought. Can you build it up? Can you like...
The dome of the
build it over the dome. Leave the dome.
Yeah,
Leave the dome of the rock.
Still think the Muzzies would be upset about it. Yeah, I get the feeling they would be. And
what about under? What about a subterranean temple?
Well, and so that was the thing, like the Romans destroyed the temple so that the sacrifices could never be made. Right? The Romans like knew religiously what they were doing. They're like,
we're going to end your religion.
Yeah, we're going to end your religion. We're going to end your identity. And Judaism had these resources, already because they'd already lost a temple before. So they've got like, that's why you get synagogues that are pre the second temple. So they've got this sort of like infrastructure to like cope with this.
But sacrifices don't occur.
No.
At the synagogue.
No, but it's like, yeah, I mean, this is like the beautiful thing of, I can't remember what psalm it is, but like, the Holocaust will be offered onto your altar and like a contrite heart you will not spurn. So like the Jews have this like history in the Psalms of like developing this idea that they don't need the sacrifices so much as like what you need to do is like
want the sacrifices.
Yeah, but also, and that so Christianity picks up on that, and St. Paul talks about this when he talks about it's not important to be circumcised in your body, it's important to be circumcised in your heart. Yeah. Right? Like,
it's nice.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's much nicer.
In a dirtier, weirder way, David Foster Wallace writes of the erection of the heart. And I'd never realised at the time that he was definitely channeling.
He's definitely riffing on St. Paul. Yeah.
St. Paul. Now, where are we up to? In what way did Christ offer himself to the Father?
The entire life of Christ was a free offering to the Father to carry out his plan of salvation. He gave his life as a ransom for many. And in this way, he reconciled all of humanity with God. His suffering and death showed how his humanity was the free and perfect instrument of that divine love which desires the salvation of all people. So that's the point I was just trying to make.
Yeah.
And the other important thing to say here is like the ransom for many. So like, and this is in the English Mass, which if people go to, which I'm assuming some people listening to this will, there is a point in the consecration where it says like for you and for many, right? Which is like what Christ says at the Last Supper.
Yeah.
And this was a sort of controversial point when it was being translated. In the 70s, it was translated as for you and for all. About 2012, Pope Benedict issued a new English translation of the Mass, which says for you and for many, and people got very upset because it's like, well, it's in Christ die for all. But the point being made is that it's for those who choose it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I don't know, it's a complicated theological point. Maybe it didn't need to be said.
Well, no, I mean, I think Francis popped off about the Lord's Prayer needing to be revised in English because he wasn't happy about it, which, I mean, he makes a good point. Lead us not into temptation does sound like God leads us into temptation, or doesn't. Like, we're asking him not to do something he doesn't do, whereas in the Latin...
Translation's
Greek,
tricky.
yeah.
Yeah, translation's tricky. Always present difficulties.
But is everybody saved?
No.
No.
I don't think so. I don't think the Catechism says so either.
It doesn't say that anyone is not saved.
No, and so, yeah, this is a good point. Like, so the church says, we know these people are in heaven when it canonizes someone.
Yeah.
It says this person is a saint, they're in heaven with God, we can ask for their intercession.
Yeah.
The church never says.
That motherfucker in hell.
Exactly.
But Judas Iscariot, it would be better if he were never born. Is that in there biblically?
I mean, it is in there biblically.
Ah.
So it's difficult to say maybe no one's in hell. At least one person, I think, is in hell. Yeah.
Well, is there not some possible invective that he could have been using there?
We'll
have
get
you seen
to
Jesus
hell.
Christ Superstar?
Yeah, I've seen
When
it.
Judas comes back and he's
Yeah.
with the angels and he has a beautiful song.
Yeah.
That's in the Inferno. He doesn't do as much dancing.
No, he does not.
Every time I look at you, I don't understand why you let the things you do get so out of hand.
It's like the third time you brought up Jesus Christ Superstar.
If you'd come there, you could have said the whole nation. Israel in 4 BC had no mass communication. Now, don't you get me wrong. Don't you get that wrong. It's a good song, man. I've always wanted to play Judas. One idea that I had.
You'd be a great Judas.
I think I'd be an excellent Judas, but
Yeah.
I'd get cast as Herod, which is my favourite idea for a role.
You would be a great Herod.
Well, the Christ. King Herod's the best role because you got one song. It's after the intermission. Everyone else is running around frantic, whatever. You're having a couple of drinks. You stumble out at intermission. Like I think it's just before intermission. Anyway, you get your funny song, and then you're done.
And then you're done.
Day.
Yeah. You get to go and piss up in the back room.
Ah, man, start ogling the audience to see who you'd like to invite backstage. To
Seven veils.
But I did think it would be good to do a version of when I was playing the piano accordion a lot. I would think I'll do a full version of Jesus Christ Superstar in an hour, just me on the piano.
You can
accordion.
play the piano accordion?
Have we never discussed that?
How did I not know this about you?
I'm sorry. It never comes out at parties because I don't have one at the moment.
Oh,
but I'm pretty good at the piano.
I want to
accordion.
buy you a piano
I
accordion.
didn't have to learn that many songs to be good at, but I would busk. It's like my biggest ever busking thing would be to dress up as Santa with a piano accordion and just play the Tetris song for like 4 hours and pull in $150, $200.
James, you're always complaining about not having enough money. I don't understand why you're not doing this now.
Man, it sucks. It sucks bad. All
right, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
How is Jesus' offering expressed at the Last Supper?
At the Last Supper with his apostles on the eve of his passion, Jesus anticipated, that is, both symbolized his free offering and made it really present. This is my body which is given for you. This is my blood which is poured out. Thus he both instituted the Eucharist as the memorial of his sacrifice and instituted his apostles as priests of the new covenant. I read that really weird. Sorry, I put the inflections in the wrong spots. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably pretty standard. I think we can probably move on. I'm a bit embarrassed, actually, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, because I try and put the emphasis.
They put weird italics in there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of is poured out.
There's lots of commas and...
Given. Yeah. Don't worry about it, man. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
You read so well. Not nearly so well as some other people.
I
on the
know.
podcast.
You're a great reader,
What
James.
happened in the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane?
Despite the horror which death represented for the sacred humanity of Jesus, who was the author of life, the human will of the Son of God remained faithful to the will of the Father for our salvation. Jesus accepted the duty to carry our sins in his body, becoming obedient unto death. We've already talked about this already when we talked about the two wills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the garden.
Yeah.
What is it about the garden that... I mean, this is sort of weird as a Catholic because this is not emphasized as a Protestant. It's like the cross is important.
Yeah.
But the garden is like... He's thinking heavy about stuff.
Mm.
But for the Catholics, there's this like theology of, at the moment that he's in the garden, he's carrying everyone's sin from that point on. Like that's when he takes the cup.
Yeah.
And it's when he's sweating blood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's also like it's one of the only moments in the Gospels where you're sort of getting like a psychological image of Christ, I suppose. Right? Like you're looking at him directly communing with the Father in a way that you kind of haven't seen before. And it's
curveball, right? Like when he weeps.
And you're seeing his humanity,
yeah,
but you're seeing his divinity and his obedience. I don't know, it's a beautiful thing. And it's also like one of those things where I relate to the garden a lot.
Often falling asleep.
No, because I think as a Christian, it's like this world is a trial. This world is difficult. And it's that whole thing of like, I don't want to follow. I don't want to accept my cross. I don't want to do it. And it might not, you don't have to like relate to the crucifixion because it might not be your death, But it's like
No, your decision to take it on and risk it.
it's the dread.
Yeah.
You know, like it's that like dread of the thing happening, and when you go, okay, well, I'll do it because it's the will of God. Like that, it's hard, but you're also comforted by the fact that Christ had to do this too.
But he's like our sins enter into him at that moment. Some sort of like.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, that's weird theology, I think.
Well, that theology does exist, and then it's like lessened by when we offer up sufferings for him, we take the burden of that off him in the garden.
St. Paul says we can make up for the sufferings that Christ lacks in his crucifixion.
Yeah,
with our own. Yeah,
which then becomes a very bizarre calculus with some of the.
Well, it's not a matter of I think that's where you can go wrong. It's thinking
stuff.
of it as a calculus
Yeah.
of like, he only 90% suffered, and I've got to give my 1%. Got to give it 110%.
Please don't give 110% of that.
But the other thing is like it's a garden, and it's a sort of like barren, dead garden, right? Like so, like symbolically.
Can we go there? Is that around?
Yeah. It's Garden of Gethsemane is still there, and there are like trees there that are like 2,000 years old.
Okay.
It's like,
That's cool.
did these feet in ancient times. You know?
So why is it a garden? Why is it still there? Surely someone would have built on it in the intervening years.
No, but I'm saying like it's like if you're looking at in the sort of Jordan Peterson symbolism stuff,
Yeah.
which I think you have to read it to a certain degree like this.
Sure.
Where is he? He's in a garden, right? And
Yeah.
it's just sort of like it's
Cultivated.
nighttime and people are sleeping
Yeah.
and he's suffering and he's weeping blood, and it's like, okay, well, where else do we know a garden from?
Well, it is Eden.
Right. And then it's like, okay, well then, like and we'll get to this shortly, but like at the resurrection, the women come to the tomb to like dress his body, and the stones roll back and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, he's gone. And in one of the gospel accounts, they meet Christ, the resurrected Christ. They don't recognize him. Who do they think he is? They think he's a gardener. And it's the morning. Right? And it's like there's all this stuff going on where it's like, there's this through line of like, well, because you're back in Eden now, right? Like, and where was the last time you saw God walking in the cool of the morning?
Nice. I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. When he
So
was
great.
out. Yeah. And I was just thinking about, have you read Atonement? This is much lower basic.
The
level.
Ian McEwan novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like he's a gardener, the intellectual boy who's undone by all the trouble.
Yep.
Like there's this long section about how like landscape gardening is
Yeah.
like you're taming nature. It's man's will imposed upon nature. Like it's a wild thing and it's an organic thing, but in a garden is where that is. He's not in a forest. He's not in the woods. He's in a place where the will is being exercised over like reality.
Yeah.
Which is what he's doing in the garden, right? He's
Well, it's not a wild
conforming
woods. Yeah,
his-
exactly.
yeah.
He's like he's doing the thing that you're supposed to do in Genesis, which is like you're responsible. You have to like make this in your image and likeness as I've made you in mine. You know, you put order into it.
But a garden is a place of taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Not my garden, terribly overrun.
What does your garden say about you?
It says that I'm a renter and I don't care. 122. What are the results of the sacrifice of Christ on the cross?
Jesus freely offered his life as an expiatory sacrifice, that is, he made reparation for our sins with the full obedience of his love unto death. This love to the end of the Son of God reconciled all of humanity with the Father. The paschal sacrifice of Christ therefore redeems humanity in a way that is unique, perfect, and definitive, and it opens up for them communion with God. So, what are the results of the sacrifice on the cross? It's reparation, it's reconciliation, it's redemption, and it's communion. Those are the four sort of like key verbs in that thing. And that's what he affects by his crucifixion. Those are all pretty good things.
Yes. I have no problems with any of that. That all just seems... that seems like a long and complicated way of just saying our natural relationship with God is restored.
But it's more than just that, right? Because it's like, again, in the Jewish temple cult, you have like different sacrifices of different things, right? Like, I have to do this in order to get that. I have to do this in order to get that. And Christ is doing like all of them at once. He's offering reparation for sin, which is like a particular type of sacrifice. He's reconciling us with God, which is a particular type of sacrifice. He's redeeming humanity, which is a particular type of sacrifice. And then from all of that, you can now have that communion, which he's bringing down to you. It's great. It's so good.
Unique, perfect, and definitive. I mean, but perfect and definitive. Yeah, I mean, they do.
So
mean
it's
slightly
perfect. It doesn't have to be done again.
Yeah.
And it's definitive. It doesn't have to
Also
be done
doesn't have to be done again.
Yeah.
I mean, one of those should have been definitive on their own.
Well, it's
Just, but no, it's like
you can't labour the point too much. I don't think. Otherwise,
need-
people start killing their dogs and shit. You know. Ah man, I really fucked up today. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right.
So we don't have to do any more sacrifices.
No.
We just have to.
It's once and for
this
all.
Is what, like the battle has been won. It's
Yes.
over. The hour has come.
Yes.
And we just have to get with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Boom. Let's move on.
Why does Jesus call upon his disciples to take up their cross?
By calling his disciples to take up their cross and follow him, Jesus desires to associate with his redeeming sacrifice those who are to be its first beneficiaries. So again, we are his disciples. And Christ says quite definitively, take up your cross and follow me.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. And so, again, it's this whole thing of like, how are we to become a saint? How are we to become holy? To live a life like him, which includes obedience to God, which is a cross, you know, and there are many crosses in our lives, right?
Yeah.
Like you're married and your wife is...
She's a cross.
She's a cross to you, right?
She's a very cross with me at the moment.
That's right. I'm sure she is.
No, I'm
but
just
it's
kidding. We're having
it's
a good
only
time.
by that instrument
Yeah.
that you become the person you're meant to be.
But this is the weird liminal space that we find ourselves in the... I'm sorry to use liminal again.
Liminal.
As in the Catholic worldview, the battle has been won. Your
Yep.
relationship with God is restored. The thing you should do to be in harmony is there. The world remains fallen. Word hasn't really gotten out there yet. You're going to have to suffer through this now.
Yep.
The end of times haven't come.
Yeah, I mean, we call these the last days, right? Because it's sort of like, and because we don't know the time or the hour, not
Right.
only for the end of the world, but for our own death.
There's not an additional transformation before the eschaton.
Yeah, it's like Revelation is complete, right? God has done the thing that he needs to do.
At which point there are no more days.
Yeah.
So they are the last days.
Yeah.
But there could be more last days than all the other days
We've had
put together.
2,000 years of them so far, but yeah.
Yes. The end sometimes doesn't seem quite as nigh.
Yeah. But we are in the end times in this eschatology, right?
Yeah.
Like we're already kind of living it. And so then it's like, okay, well, because of those things, we have to accept our cross and follow God. And that part of that is like proclaiming the gospel to the world. Because otherwise people won't know. We have to tell them. How did you know? Because somebody told you.
Beautiful of the feet. There's that beautiful...
Beautiful the feet.
The beautiful... which is not just like a pro-foot thing. But I was listening to a Protestant... someone was describing it like after a battle. Someone has to come back and tell you the news after the battle. We've discussed this many times. Someone has to come and tell you the news, Sam, after the battle. You know? How did it go? Did we win the day? Or did the Assyrians carry the day? And they're coming to rape everybody and take our holy holies. And so the messenger comes from the battlefield to tell you how it went. But you can tell how it went before he got there.
By the gate.
How he's walking. If he's lost, he's bedraggled. He's crawling through the dirt. But if he's won the day, he's skipping to bring you the news in his own merry time. And that those feet, the feet that you can see from the tower, these beautiful feet, how beautiful are the feet that come bearing the good news.
All right, let's just do there's one last question.
I was
going to
say,
wrap
let's
it up.
stop there and do the rest.
No,
the
there's
next
one
time.
last question here.
All right. In what condition was the body of Christ while it lay in the tomb?
Christ underwent a real death and a true burial. However, the power of God preserved his body from corruption.
Well, now, hold on. How much corruption was there going to be over the...
After 3 days.
3 days?
You seen a dead body after 3 days?
No.
There's a bit. And so that's, I can't remember
He was incorrupt.
the name of the...
Like Hector.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the artist, but there's like there's a famous painting which Dostoevsky saw and it really traumatized him, which is like, it's a painting of Christ on the third day, but the artist depicts Christ's like corruption, basically. And he's like hands are like this, and he's like rictus and all this sort of stuff. And Dostoevsky said like he saw it and he was like, this is a scandal to me. Like I've immediately lost faith in God. And it's like, yeah, and if you see a dead body after a few days, which has not been looked after, it's like it sets in quick. So yeah, I mean, we just believe that it's not that case with Christ.
Because it spooks us out so much.
I don't know, but we do believe it.
But no one's in the tomb, right?
Sure, we don't see it, yeah.
Yeah. We don't know.
Yeah, but we also do believe in incorruptible saints and stuff.
Well, this is... Yeah. So we do believe that if someone is sufficiently holy, their body does not wither and decay.
Yeah.
Do we have any examples of this?
Got plenty of examples of this.
Any examples that science will back?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to be corrected on this, there are plenty.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, anecdotally is the other thing. It's just like, oh, we dug him up and like his body was like really well preserved. You know, the other thing is like,
These are degrees sometimes.
yeah, I mean, the commies love this as well because
Yeah.
they do this with Lenin and they like embalm him and stuff. And they're like, oh, look, his body's still fine. It must mean there was something supernatural about him. Not that we believe in that sort of thing.
If anything, this is a strong argument against Marxism.
It was the
Dialectical materialism.
The dialectical materialism
'Cause
kept him
clearly
incorrupt.
there is a spiritual element that keeps Lenin
The invisible hand of the market. I mean,
Wouldn't care for that.
anyway,
We
so
got through a lot today. That's a lot.
yeah, that's a
Heavy
lot. It's a
stuff.
big, dirty one. Where are we at, Sammy? We're like an hour.
We're definitely-
I think we can call that.
I wanted to call that much earlier, but
I
I'm
know,
glad we.
but-
No, I'm glad we munched through. But I'm going to need a break.
Now we got the good stuff next week. We got the descent into hell, the ascension into heaven. Oh, it's gets sexy.
I think this is we've gone through now what Mel Gibson did in Passion of the Christ Part 1.
Now we're gonna go Passion of the Christ Part 2.